interference. Why did he do that? If he is willing to give us that kind of freedom, who are we to take it away from each other? God says, I'm going to put you on the planet. Here are the basic rules of life. The 10 Commandments, basically. Here are the basic. Other than that, y'all are free to do and believe what you want to do and believe. Accept me or reject me. That is the ultimate freedom. God gave us that. That is why we yearn to, why every human being on the planet yearns to be free, which is kind of odd when you get people who want somebody else to tell them what to do. I mean, that makes no sense. Humanly speaking, that's not enlightenment. It just doesn't make any sense. There is definitely something wrong there. Well, people can be trained, of course. But it makes no sense when you have the opportunity to be free. I don't care how scared. I mean, people say, well, it's because they're scared, Rod. I don't care how scared you are. You were scared about, everybody's scared about something. We're scared about going off to college when we're 18 years old, but we do it anyway. We're scared about buying our first house, but we do it anyway. We're scared to get married, but we do it anyway. We're scared about having that first child, but obviously we do it anyway. Well, we're scared to be free and govern ourselves. Well, do it anyway. We're scared to be responsible for ourselves. Well, do it anyway. And I would go so far as to say, for those of you who don't like guns, I'm scared of guns. Have one anyway. There is absolutely no enlightened or logical reason for taking guns away from the public. The only reason is because you don't want them to be citizens. You eventually want them to be subjects. Subjugation is not freedom. Subjugation is not liberty. Subjugation is not what God intended. Or if you'd prefer, it is not, Gaia? Is that the name of the earth? I don't know. Gaia. It isn't what Mother Nature intended. It isn't what the goddess intended. It isn't what the universe intended. Subjugation is not anywhere what anything, being, entity that caused us to be intended. Look around. We always say, well, the birds and the bees and the flowers and the trees and the fishies and the lions and the cubs and the bears and all. Oh my, they all meant to run free. We shouldn't have zoos. They're meant to run free. I kind of agree that we shouldn't probably, in most cases, have a zoo. But they're meant to run free. They're nature's creatures, man. But all of a sudden it gets to us and we're not meant to be free. An animal, they have their own protection. They don't have guns. Now, don't get me wrong. I wish to God that somehow, some way, guns were never invented. I do. I think they are destructive. Yes, they're a useful tool for feeding us, especially back in the day. But I do wish to God they weren't invented. But they have been. Therefore, I have the right to have them on a natural level. Government has no ability or right to interfere with my natural ability to be free and protect myself. My life, not yours. Your life is your own. My life is mine. I have the right to defend it in any possible way I can. If that means I can pick up a boulder and crack a criminal over the head with it, then I do it. If it means I pick up an arrow and jab it between his eyes, then I have the right to do it. If I have a gun and he's shooting at me or some other innocent person, I have a right to survival and natural survival to stop him, which means shooting him. Notice how every criminal that uses a gun, all the bad guys that use a gun, how do they get stopped? Over 99% of the time, how do they get stopped? By somebody else, a good guy with a gun. And don't tell me that, well, we don't need guns in the public. If we had more guns in public, and there's been study after study after study after study that proves this point, that more guns in public means lower violent crime. It also means that when violent crime does happen, it is less likely to escalate because somebody, at least one person, probably more, of the good guys will have guns to fire upon and stop the bad guy. I've given you example upon example of how this has happened. I've given you example upon example that if somebody was able and legally able to carry a gun, they would have stopped the perpetrator who was firing the gun. I've also given you example after example where it's an impossibility to keep guns out of a criminal's hands. The only time that people who are not going to have guns are the law-abiding citizen that you're trying to take the guns away from. Britain, you had to turn in your handguns. Guess what? Criminals in Britain still get handguns. Britain's violent criminal rate skyrocketed after that. Don't tell me that only guns cause death. Guns don't kill people. People kill people. Oh, China, they've had more school attacks in the last 20 years in the United States, and they've had almost as many kids injured and killed as we've had here in the United States. And you want to know how they've done it? They didn't have guns. Yeah, the guys were running through the schools with knives. They're cutting the kids to pieces. So don't tell me that if we got rid of guns, all this upper uber violence would disappear. It would not. The biggest single day of massacre of children and people, innocent people, other than 9/11 in this country's history was that too was done without a gun. Timothy McVeigh, anybody? How many children did Timothy McVeigh kill? And he didn't fire a single bullet. What was it? Back in 1920-something, the biggest single deadliest school attack. The man used dynamite. He blew up the school. Didn't fire a single shot. Didn't even have a gun. And I know some people are saying, well, that's dynamite. You just can't get dynamite. Timothy McVeigh didn't have dynamite. He just created an explosive off of a bunch of legal ingredients. How many times have we stopped anywhere from kids to adults from either making or setting off pipe bombs? This whole notion that guns are evil is not enlightened. It's just plain wrong. And it's damn stupid. You don't have a right to take away my gun any more than I have a right to force you to own one. It's your choice. And for crying out loud, if you want to be an idiot, I just saw a picture online. Somebody had a sign in their yard. They're anti-violence or whatever, and they're proud to be proud to be a gun-safe or gun-free zone home. You put a sign up for that? Yeah, you're also a brain-free home zone too. I mean, if I didn't have a gun, I'm not going to advertise it. That's just dumb. I got weapons. You better not roll up into my real estate, because I'm going to protect myself and what is mine. I'm going to protect my neighbors, my family, my friends. Because if you're intent on doing evil and doing bad, if you're attempting to oppress, if you're attempting to take away the God-given right to life and liberty, then I have the right to take you out. Plain and simple, society has a right, as collective individuals, to take you out. That's why we have jails. That's why we have the death penalty. That's why the founding fathers were smart enough to see fit to make sure that every man, woman, and child in this country, should they desire to, could be armed. Plain and simple, not complicated, not at all. In fact, here's a Newsmax story. Experts say new gun laws may increase crime, not prevent violence. There's no maybe about it. We can see it in Chicago. We saw it in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C., one of the toughest gun laws in the country. They were once called the murder capital of the... They were called the murder capital of the world. And they had the toughest gun laws possible. Well, you couldn't have a handgun in Washington, D.C., and yet criminals were still getting them. Criminals were still bringing guns into gun-free zones. Criminals were still killing people. But you know what? The citizens didn't have a way to fight back. All they could do was run and hide and die. As lawmakers debate a new version of the assault weapons ban, gun right advocates and criminologists are pointing out that many statistics show gun ownership actually decreases instances of crime. But you know what? Here's a dirty little secret, folks. Politicians know this. The liberals know this. Biden knows this. Obama knows this. But they don't care to keep you safe. It's not in their best interest. Trust me, if it actually worked to keep you safe and free from harm and crime where you wouldn't need government, I guarantee you that a liberal would not be for weapons banishment, because that's what they're for now. They wouldn't be for it. But you better believe that a conservative would, because if they said, oh yeah, you would be able to live free if there were no weapons, liberals wouldn't stand for it, because then you wouldn't need them. They would lose power, and you would be a citizen and not their subject. Don't doubt me.
I always loved watching the kids play basketball. I still do, even though things have changed. It's funny, they can't find jobs to get their careers started, and I can't afford to retire. And now we're all living together again. I supported President Obama because he spoke so beautifully. He promised change, but things changed for the worse. Obama started spending like our credit cards have no limit. His healthcare law made health insurance even more expensive. We've had stimulus and bailouts, Obama added almost $16,000 in debt for every American. How will my kids pay that off